4 hostages, 1 Navy destroyer. Pirates had no chance. The RPG hissed through the air, a smoke trail cutting across the Indian Ocean. It splashed short of the USS Sterett, erupting in spray just off the destroyer's bow. It missed, but the message was unmistakable. The pirates had crossed the line. Negotiations were over. But how did it come to this? 4 Americans, a stolen yacht, and a destroyer bristling with weapons, locked in a deadly standoff. The yacht quest was 58 feet of fiberglass and sail, carrying Scott and Jean Adam, Phyllis McKay, and Bob Riggle. For them, this was meant to be a voyage of faith and adventure, a chance to see the world from the deck of a small boat. For the Somali pirates who spotted them, it was a payday. Their skiffs closed in fast, outboards roaring, men clinging to the sides with rifles in their hands. A K-47 swung wildly, RPGs balanced on shoulders. The quest had no chance of outrunning them. Within minutes, the pirates scrambled aboard. Shouts in Somali filled the air. The 4 Americans were forced at gunpoint into the cabin. The pirates had done this before. Tankers, trawlers, freighters, anything they could seize was turned into leverage. The tactic was always the same: capture civilians, demand millions in ransom, threaten their lives until someone paid. It had worked hundreds of times, but this time, their hostages were Americans, and that meant the rules of the game were about to change. To the pirates, it was business as usual. Did they realize they had just declared war on the U.S. Navy? The distress call went out, and Steele answered. USS Sterett, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, steamed in fast. The difference in power was absurd. On one side, a handful of nervous pirates on a hijacked sailboat. On the other, 9,000 tons of naval dominance. The Sterett carried a 5-inch Mark 45 naval gun that could blast targets miles away. Her vertical launch system bristled with Tomahawk cruise missiles, Harpoon anti-ship missiles, and standard missiles for air defense, Phalanx CIWS, Gatling guns capable of spitting out 4,500 rounds per minute, guarded against close threats. Dozens of 50 caliber machine guns lined her decks. The destroyer had firepower to sink fleets, but against a yacht holding 4 civilians, that firepower was a blunt sword. The captain of the Sterett knew his mission: protect the hostages. That meant patience, negotiation, and discipline. No trigger could be pulled unless there was no other choice. The standoff began. The destroyer shadowed the yacht, keeping close enough to watch every move. Negotiators used radios and loudspeakers. "Release the Americans. You will not be harmed." The pirates shouted back. They demanded millions. Safe passage to Somalia, guarantees. They waved weapons, screamed threats, and fired shots into the water. The answer from the Navy never changed. No ransom, no deal. Pirates thought 4 rifles and 4 hostages gave them leverage. Could that really stand against a destroyer with tomahawks on deck? If you believe in America's strength, you're in the right place. Subscribe and join our crew. Inside the quest, the Americans endured a nightmare. Trapped below, they listened to angry voices above, the stomp of boots, the crack of gunfire. Their captors grew more agitated with every passing hour. On the destroyer's bridge, sailors studied them through binoculars. "They're unstable," one whispered. "One twitch and those hostages are gone." Behind them, SEALs prepared. They laid out MK-11 sniper rifles, M4 carbines, and pistols. They rehearsed boarding drills. They stood ready. One muttered, "If they pull the trigger, we're going in." But still, the order was restraint. The Navy would give the pirates every chance to surrender. Hours stretched into days. Heat bore down, tempers frayed, Rifles waved dangerously close to innocent lives. The pirates fired bursts into the sky to prove they were serious. Each shot echoed across the water like a warning bell. Every passing second felt like sand, slipping through an hourglass. Would the Navy make it in time? The Americans prayed below deck, clinging to each other. They knew rescue was close. They could see the destroyer looming on the horizon. But rescue felt as fragile as the thin cabin walls around them. And then came the escalation. One pirate hefted an RPG onto his shoulder. He didn't aim at the hostages. He aimed at the destroyer itself. The hiss came first, then the smoke trail. The rocket streaked across the water and splashed short, exploding harmlessly in spray. It missed, but it didn't matter, because once the pirates fired on the destroyer, the rules had changed. Pirates had just fired an RPG at an American warship. Did they really think they'd survive the answer? On the bridge of the Sterett, sailors stood frozen for a second after the RPG splashed into the sea. Smoke still curled in the air. The captain's voice broke the silence, firm but calm. RPG fired. They've escalated. Keep eyes on. Hostages remain the priority. That last line mattered most. The destroyer could obliterate the yacht in seconds, but 4 Americans were still inside. The mission was not victory by firepower. The mission was life. The tension was unbearable. Through binoculars, sailors saw pirates pacing, waving rifles, shouting at each other. Their control was slipping. And inside the yacht, 4 innocent lives were balanced on the edge. Negotiators tried again, voices steady over loudspeakers. Release the Americans. You will not be harmed. This is your chance. The pirates shouted back in broken English and Somali. Demands for money, demands for safe passage to Somalia, demands they would never get. One pirate raised his rifle high and fired into the air. Another gestured with a grenade, making it clear. One wrong move, and he'd pull the pin. How do you negotiate with men who treat their own lives like they're expendable? The Navy had seen this before. Pirates living in desperation, hardened by years of lawlessness. They weren't soldiers. They weren't trained. They were opportunists with guns, and fear made them more dangerous. But on the Sterett, discipline ruled. The captain held his line. No ransom, no compromise. Not now, not ever. Behind the bridge, in a secure compartment, SEALs waited. They had been flown in and briefed. Their gear was laid out with precision. Night vision goggles, breaching charges, ropes, flashbangs, rifles zeroed, pistols checked, ammunition counted and recounted. One SEAL, adjusting the sling on his MK-11 sniper rifle, muttered, "If they fire inside that yacht, it's game over for them." Another answered quietly, "Just give the word." Every man there knew what was at stake. Rescue the hostages. Eliminate the threat. But time was slipping away. Hours stretched on. Sunlight faded, returned, and faded again. Each passing day only sharpened the danger. The pirates grew more reckless. Their shouts turned to screams. Gunfire cracked, sometimes into the water, sometimes at random, each burst echoing across the waves. Would the pirates hold out for ransom, or would desperation push them into murder? On board the yacht, the Americans endured a nightmare. Locked in the cabin, they whispered prayers, clutched each other's hands, tried to stay calm as rifles banged against the walls above. They knew the Navy was there. They could hear the destroyer's engines, see its silhouette on the horizon. But they also knew rescue meant nothing if the pirates pulled their triggers first. The crew of the Sterett watched every second. "We could see them," one sailor said later, pacing, yelling, firing into the air. You just knew it was a matter of time. Then came the crack that everyone had dreaded. Gunfire. Inside the yacht. Muffled, but unmistakable. Screams followed. On the Sterett's bridge, officers snapped their heads around. The call rang out. Gunfire on the yacht! Hostages in danger. The captain didn't hesitate. Engage. Launch. RHIBS. SEALS go. The order ripped through the ship like lightning. In seconds, RHIBS, rigid hull inflatable boats, splashed into the sea. SEALs dropped in, weapons ready, engines roaring as they tore across the waves toward the yacht. On deck, pirates panicked. Some fired wildly toward the Navy boats, bullets splashing into the water. Others scrambled to reload. But against U.S. Navy SEALs, panic was suicide. The assault came fast. Flashbangs cracked, blinding and deafening. SEALs swarmed the deck, rifles barking in short, controlled bursts. Pirates went down one by one. Some tried to fight, some tried to run. None succeeded. Chaos was everywhere. But chaos is where SEALs thrive. The fight was brutal, close quarters. One SEAL described it later. It was over in minutes, fast, violent, decisive. They didn't have a chance. 2 pirates lay dead on the deck. Others were dragged down, zip-tied, and thrown face first to the floor. But below deck, the SEALs made the discovery no one wanted. The 4 Americans, Scott and Jean Adam, Phyllis McKay, and Bob Riggle, were gone, killed before the SEALs could reach them. The news spread across the Sterett like a shadow. Sailors clenched their fists, jaws tight. Some stared out at the sea in silence. Others muttered the same word: bastards. The pirates had promised ransom. Instead, they delivered murder. But America's answer was swift. 13 pirates were captured alive, shackled, blindfolded, chained. They were dragged aboard the destroyer. There would be no escape. They were flown to the United States. In courtrooms far from Somalia, they faced American law. The evidence was overwhelming. Witnesses testified. Forensic proof sealed their fate. Some were sentenced to life in prison without parole. One, convicted of firing on the hostages, was sentenced to death. Pirates thought they could vanish into the sea. Instead, they found themselves staring at a U.S. judge, chained and powerless. For the families back home, the loss was crushing. 4 lives ended. 4 Americans who would never sail again. But their deaths carried a message. The United States does not yield to pirates. On the Sterett, the crew mourned, but they also stood proud. They had done everything possible. They had shown restraint, patience, and courage. And when the pirates crossed the line, America answered with force. One sailor summed it up. They thought 4 rifles could outplay an American destroyer. That's arrogance, and arrogance got them killed or in chains. The destroyer's flag flew high. Her weapons remained ready, and her crew knew their mission hadn't changed. Protect Americans, always. If you believe in America's strength, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe for more Navy stories. Pirates had fired an RPG at an American destroyer. They had murdered Americans under its watch. But in the end, they didn't win. They never could. The story of the quest is a tragedy. 4 Americans murdered on the high seas. Families broken. A voyage ended in blood. But it is also a story of resolve. When the pirates fired that RPG, when they turned their rifles on innocent lives, they wrote their fate. They thought hostages made them untouchable. They thought the Navy would retreat. They thought wrong. Every man captured that night was flown to America in chains. They didn't sail home with ransom. They didn't return as victors. They faced American justice. Some will never breathe free air again. One paid with his life. 4 rifles against a destroyer. 4 hostages against America's resolve. Could there ever have been any other ending? Our Navy is more than missiles and guns. It is a promise that Americans will not be left defenseless, that our freedom will be guarded, and that those who kill our people will face the most powerful Navy on Earth. The quest ended in tragedy, but it also ended in proof. No ransom, no surrender, no retreat. When Somali pirates killed 4 Americans, the U.S. Navy made sure it was the last mistake they ever made. This was One Battle. Subscribe now and don't miss the next one.